Well, what's your question, Ed? You got a comment?
Hey, I'm just trying to figure out what your thoughts are on the coronavirus and President Trump's chances of winning re-election.
Well, that's a great question. I tell you what, and if a person is a Democrat, what I've noticed over the past week or so, and I've gotten some messages from them, they are celebrating these developments because they're saying, finally, this is the way we're going to take down President Trump. He's done a terrible job responding to this coronavirus epidemic. He's created more of a problem than he's solved, et cetera, et cetera. And, as we were kind of trying to get to, I don't think we quite finished the thought earlier in the show, but it's really not the time to do a post-mortem on this event now because the event is still really possibly in its early stages, and we've got to see how everything plays out, how some of these actions that the president has taken that, by the way, the Democrats bemoaned, like closing the borders to Chinese travelers, closing the borders to European travelers. They said this is the wrong idea. We should have open borders, is what the Democrats say. We got to see how those actions actually play out. And, of course, if you listen to some of the people in the administration, like Dr. Anthony Fauci, he says that closing the borders to China is one of the best things that we've done in this entire crisis, that we absolutely had to do it. It's one of the best things we've done. Now, when we couple this, what's going on, and we're going to have to wait and see, but, we've just talked about a lot of these closings, and we didn't even get to all of them that we had to talk about. They're just closings everywhere. Apparently, the governor of the state of Washington is going to come out today and do the same thing, issue a proclamation closing all bars and restaurants and other things. So, when you've got all of these closings, you've got to think about all of this economic activity going away and the sort of after effects in normal people's lives that's going to create. Now, does all of this effectively get blamed on President Trump? Well, if you watch the media, that's certainly what they're trying to do. They're totally politicizing this and trying to say this is all President Trump's fault, as though he has any control over a pandemic of this nature. Earlier in the show, we just ran through some numbers for you of previous pandemics, which to date, the coronavirus has not been nearly as severe as those pandemics. We talked a little bit about the swine flu pandemic. Well, that didn't get blamed on President Obama, okay? We go back to the Black Death. Did that get blamed on some politician? No. These things are not within the control of a single politician. President Trump doesn't control everything in the entire world that occurs. But this is the way the media is trying to spin it, that somehow his actions, and we heard some of the questions at the recent press conferences about, you closed the pandemic office. I mean, when you look into the details of that, he didn't even do it. It was John Bolton. And it was a bunch of Obama holdovers. And by the way, a few bureaucrats in the administration are going to stop this. A few bureaucrats have never stopped anything. So the idea that somehow shutting down some pandemic response unit that was basically like an appendix, a useless appendage on the federal government, which is already too huge, shutting that down somehow created this crisis, that's complete nonsense. But that is what the storyline that the media is pushing, and they're pushing it, and Google's pushing it, and they're trying to get you to believe it, and Facebook's pushing it. They're all pushing it. It's all you can see in your news feed. That's all I see. And it's taking root in a lot of people's minds. I hear that from people who are more oriented towards the Democrats, and they're saying, this is it. We're finally going to get President Trump. And I just think how sad that is, and how, one of my other sources said it's almost criminal, and I have to say I concur with that thought process. The idea that you want to sink the entire ship that we're all riding on in order to kill the captain. We're all going down with this ship if this goes down. And you want that to happen just so you can be gleeful about taking out President Trump and his administration. But to answer the question,
I have a follow-up for
you.
Go
ahead, Ed. Go ahead.
The United States Supreme Court just announced that they're postponing and suspending arguments amid the coronavirus threat. What are your impressions there?
Well, it's we didn't get to cover one of the closings. My impressions are everything is shutting down. We're going to see everything shut down, and this is going to continue to be an echo chamber, that this is a massive crisis, and maybe that's exactly right. Maybe this is going to be a massive crisis with, I've seen numbers of, in the range of 1.1 million U.S. deaths. Maybe that's what lies ahead of us in the next 3 months. We don't know that from where we sit right now. But that's what these government actions tend to make one think, is that they've gotten numbers and they've gotten projections that tell them that something much, much more serious is coming. And if that's not the case, I think a lot of these closings and a lot of this hysteria is overblown. Now, that being said, Ed, I'm glad you brought up the U.S. Supreme Court closing, because one thing I didn't get to mention earlier is the Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court has closed court in the state of Florida for at least the next 2 weeks through the end of March. He said there to be no more in-person court hearings, no trials, no jury trials, no jury summonses. That's all closed. And that's, as you know, one of the many things that we've seen closing in the legal community. I mean, we've seen bar associations canceling all events. I had several conferences that I was scheduled to go to in the next several months. Those are all canceled. I had a trip to go to Sweden. I've had to cancel that. I mean, everything is being canceled. So I certainly hope that it's not for a good reason, that we're not about to get hit with a pandemic with a death rate of something like what we've seen in Italy. But if those are the numbers that the CDC and other government agencies are working with, then I think they're responding appropriately to enact all these closings. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.